Morning, everyone, and welcome to the next Sparked AU Core Technical Design Group session. I'd like to start today's session with an acknowledgement of country, and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. In today's agenda, we've got usual business with approval of minutes and going through updates and news. There's an AU CDI R2 update from Kylene coming out of the CDG session that was held yesterday. And then we've got the proposal for AU Core HealthcareService that has been out for review for the last couple of weeks. And we've had a few conversations about it and information session leading into this. Then we've got some JIRAs, some of our backlog around mostly the editorial issues that have been brought to this meeting. And then, excuse me, we're going to go through what's next. But before I move on, is there anything else that people would like to add to the agenda today? All right, I'm not hearing anything. And I'll call again at the end of this meeting for any items for our next meeting. Let's go into usual business. So first up, as always, is approval of minutes. The minutes from our last meeting were sent round a while ago. I'm just going to bring those up. There's no outstanding feedback to my knowledge. So here's where we are. We've got this content. We ended up discussing both a report back from Connectathon and a testing update, as well as going through two of these JIRAs. So we've got here attendees, we've got our slides and our YouTube link, and the set of minutes and the voting we did, which also made some decisions around the times that we're meeting at now, post daylight savings. So does anyone need any more time to review this before I call for approval? All right, I'm not hearing anyone. So can I get someone to motion approval of the minutes of our last meeting?
Dushi.
Thanks, Dushi. Who would like to second?
Yeah, I'll
I'm
second that
happy
for you.
to. Go, David.
Thanks, David. We'll have David as seconding that. Are there any other calls for feedback or otherwise while I'm going to the poll? All right, I'm going to launch that now. So you should see coming up on your screen an electronic poll to vote affirmative, negative, or abstain. If you didn't attend the meeting, feel free to click abstain. If you do not have access to the electronic vote, do have access to the chat, you can put your vote in the chat. If you have dialed in and you can't see either of those, you can call your name and whether you vote affirmative, negative, or abstain, and I'll add that to the total. All right, we've got 70% of participants who have voted. All right, that's now up to 80%. And I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. So we have 15 who have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 12 abstain. So the motion carries and those minutes have passed. Thank you. Okay, oops, went too far. Actions. Actions out of the last meeting. There was one on me and there was one on Dushi. So we looked at one of the JIRAs out of our last meeting around some editorial improvements to our pages. And I have an action on me to review the title of the page. I have not done that. So that action is still open and I'll report back about it in the next meeting. And I've put a pause on that. And the reason why I think will come out of Kylene giving us an update on AU CDI. So Dushi, over to you on an update on this bringing the proposed change back to the TDG that we'd voted on. Would you like me to go to the JIRA?
Yes, please. Have you got the? Yeah, Yes, please.
Do. I can
And then
also
I might,
give you share screen if you'd like instead.
if you want to go to the Jira, and then I'll just share the branch.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'll just walk through this quickly. We considered in our last meeting this issue that was raised some time ago, which had noted that we have both an AU Core diagnostic result observation profile and we have an AU Core pathology result observation profile, but we didn't have clear documentation on the relationship between the two profiles. So we looked at that and agreed that we should make some changes and that we should basically adapt the language that was in AU Base, because AU Base has the same thing, into our profiles, which meant that we would be adding in a bit of profile specific implementation guidance and also updating the description of the profile to make clear which one is for use with pathology and which one is for use with non-pathology. And we also agreed out of that, because that was quite kind of ambiguous what the change might look like, to bring back those changes to this call to have a look at it before we merge that into AU Core. And so Dushi's got that branch available. Did you want to share your screen now and I'll stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Let me know if you can see that. You should be seeing AU Core FireIG list of profiles.
Yes, we can see that. Thanks, Dushi.
All right. Okay. So as agreed, we made some changes to the wording to clarify the relationship between the two profiles and align with AU Base. And I'll start with AU Core Diagnostic Result Observation profile wording. Is this big enough, or shall I make it bigger?
You can always go bigger.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make.
A bit bigger would be good. Thanks.
All right. Is this better now?
Yep, better.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay. So the first change is that we updated description to now clearly state that this profile is for specialist or other diagnostic results that are not imaging or not pathology. This is consistent with wording in AU Base diagnostic result profile. The next update is we updated the usage scenarios to consistently refer to specialist or other diagnostic results for a patient. So all three usage scenarios adopted the same wording. We've also added a STU note to clarify that there is currently no specific imaging result profile in AU Core. Implementers are directed to the AU-based diagnostic imaging result profile, and future updates of AU Core may include support for imaging results. In the profile-specific implementation guidance, we also added a note to clearly state that pathology results should be represented using AU Core pathology result observation profile. And if we go to the pathology result observation profile, we added a note in the implementation guidance to state that the AU Core diagnostic result observation profile should be used for non-pathology and non-imaging diagnostic results. So that's all the changes that are made to bring these two profiles in line with AU Base wording and clearly explain which profile is to use in each situation. Are there any questions or concerns?
Heath.
My main comment is the last dot point that you just referred to, where we're kind of referring to the other profile. I think that should be up in the top introductory section rather than as implementation guidance for this particular profile.
So your suggestion is on both profiles, because they should live in the same spot.
Yeah,
move that out of profile specific implementation guidance and move it to sit, is it between the first paragraph and then the bit that says see comparison? Is that where you're thinking it goes?
I think that would be good, or yep, as a separate statement would make it really stand out. But I think it needs to be put right up the top that this is not the place to, it's almost like misuse. It's for me, it doesn't make sense to go into profile specific implementation guidance to say, if you want to do something else, go over here. That should be up the top.
Do she?
I would still prefer to keep implementation guidance as it is. That makes it consistent with the approach in other profiles. But I agree with the change to add something to the description to clearly indicate that this is for pathology only.
If there
Well,
is
that being said, I'd like to say that the description actually says pathology results. So
Yes, it
I
does.
don't think we need to say pathology results that are pathology results. Are you coming back to what you were saying, Douchey? I think what you're saying is that bullet point matching AU base, because I think if you go to the AU base profile, I believe AU base has it in the same spot. Is that what you're...
AU base, so in AU base, the pathology doesn't say anything. The AU base pathology result doesn't refer to the generic profile. Well, non-pathology diagnostic result profile. So there is nothing there. But if we look at the diagnostic result does point from the implementation guidance, does point to these more specific profiles to use, and also in the AU Core diagnostic result profile, we do point to the pathology result observation profile from the implementation guidance. So I think that's consistent approach to referring to more specific profiles to use in certain scenarios.
I'm always in favor of consistency, but I still feel that we should be saying this is not the right place to be. This is not the right profile right up front. But yeah, I'm happy if my comment is rejected, or somewhat happy.
I would posit that my only concern is I guess the consistency one about I think that I agree about what you're suggesting in terms that I certainly don't have a problem if to represent the result of a specialist or ... was actually moved up higher. I also don't have a problem with it here, as long as it's the same in both specifications so that we don't confuse people who are trying to, because I mean, really, people are going to need to read both generally. And I do actually think that this one is clear that it's pathology, and the other one with the changes says in the first sentence it's not pathology. So I do actually think that's clear. It doesn't directly tell you up the top where to go for pathology. And so I think an argument could be made, but I guess I don't think we should move differently. So it's still keeping the same wording. We're just arguing about, do we move that text up higher on the page?
Can you just go back to the diagnostic one? I just want to see how, do we refer to imaging there as well?
Yes.
We do from the description, yes.
No, down in the actual guidance. So you're only referencing pathology there. You should be referencing imaging as well.
In AU Core, there is no specific imaging profile. That's why we added this S2 note to say that AU Core doesn't currently support imaging results.
Do we have imaging? You're saying we don't have imaging in Core yet?
Yes, that's right. We don't.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have imaging in base?
Was that the request for imaging or
Yes.
the result of imaging?
It's the result. Hey, can you just having a look at the STU note, there's nothing in Core. Implementers can refer to base, but we wouldn't provide. Yeah. when we do have a imaging result observation, if that comes into the scope of core, which is very likely in a future release, I would see that that would automatically be added here.
So you don't think it's worth pointing back to base, imaging in base?
I think there's an STU note that in a very
you've got it there.
highlighted colours.
Okay. Yep.
Is the screen sharing not working for you?
No, just looking at different spots elsewhere as well.
Can I suggest an action where if we're satisfied with the wording, but it's really about moving, but looking at potentially moving where that reference is, and that the move should be done across both base and core. We could check. Does anyone on the line have an objection to a potential action to move the bottom bullet point from profile specific implementation guidance up, right up the top, as long as that change was also made in AU base? Does anyone have an objection to that and thinks that it should belong in profile specific implementation guidance? I'm not hearing anything. So what we could do is ask to table at the next firework group meeting that move from AU base. And as long as they move that text, we could just automatically move that text in AU core. Would that be an acceptable action to take?
But if it is about profile specific information, shouldn't it, the guidance shouldn't it live under the heading of the profile specific implementation guidance section and not move it up to the top?
But my argument is that it's actually not relevant to this profile. It is more of a misuse guidance than an actual usage guidance. But I don't want to waste too much time on this thing, but I mean, the easiest way to probably appease me is to just repeat it rather than move it. But
no, that would result, yeah.
Yeah, repeating has a problem of redundancy and also maintenance issues. If you change at one spot, you have to remember to change it at another spot. I don't think that is a desirable option.
Yeah, as I said, I'm happy to move on. Whatever the committee agrees.
So can I just check? I proposed a potential action which would address the consistency issue between base and core, which is to take the suggestion to base, noting that Stephen has raised a point around why it does belong in profile specific implementation guidance. Do you want us to raise it? Yeah.
My point is more about context, Danielle. So if we move it up sort of to the top, does it sort of derails the context that is supposed to be under? So that's the key issue.
So Heath, are you happy for this to continue, or would you like to take would you like us to proceed with an action?
If no one else here thinks there's an issue, then I don't want to waste any more committee meeting time anywhere else either. So let's just move on if people are happy where it is.
All right, so call for other comments or questions, or for other people to also endorse that that text could live somewhere else. All right, I'm not hearing any. So at this point, let's note that there was that comment in the minutes from Heath. We will proceed with the change that is put in from Dushi, and we can always look for improvements post that merge as we come into ballot. Thanks, everyone. I do appreciate a thorough investigation of potential changes. I think it's good.
All right, thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
All right, I will start sharing again. Let me just get back to the actual PowerPoint, and we're on usual business. Here we are. Okay. All right, so we've passed the actions point. And on updates and news, okay, 2 points of business here. We had an AU-based R6 scoping meeting, which was held, I think, last week. There were no, I think, big impacts coming to us in terms of AU Core. There's some work proceeding in AU base, looking at things like progressing coverage, progressing service request, a number of the e-requesting resources that aren't yet in the scope of AU Core. One of the things that will likely impact us coming in, but only through inheritance sense, is the addition of a new identifier profile into AU base for a patient internal profile. And I don't know why I clicked on that link. I should have just gone straight to this one. There's a proposal, and this is coming in from e-requesting, to add in an additional recognized way to share patient IDs. There's currently a medical record number in AU base, and this is coming in to go, let's have a PII. And that proposal is out. The links to all of that is on Zulip. So you can have a look at that if this is relevant to you. If this goes into AU base, we will inherit this as a potential option in AU Core. For any of the other people who were there at the last firework group meeting, is there anything else that you think is relevant to call out for the AU Core TDG about the work that's going to be undertaken in AU base? Right, I'm not hearing anything, so let's go to the update. On the Spark testing event, we have scheduled one for the 24th of June. Their registration is open for the next 2 weeks. We've had a good response so far, which is pretty amazing. And it's still open for a couple of weeks. This is a joint one looking at testing across core patient summary and e-requesting, and also looking at a number of people who are looking at combining those, including making use of things like smart forms. So if you are interested to come to Brisbane, please fill this out and register. We've got the link there. And I think, Jushi, if you could provide the link to the direct registration for that form in the chat, that would be great.
I'll do it now.
Thanks, Jushi. All right, so that's a one-day testing event. And I'll hand over to Kylie to give us an update on AUCDI-R2.
Thanks, Danielle. So just a really quick update on AUCDI-R2. We are still in line to publish it in June coming up. AUCDI-R2 will contain all of the R1 content plus content from the patient summary component that was out for feedback at the end of last year, and the content from the chronic condition management component, which was just out recently. We are planning to remove a lot of the introductory and explanatory material from AUCDI itself, and actually moving that to the website so that can be a little bit more dynamic and really kind of pare down AUCDI to focus on the data group library. So we'll have a little bit of introductory information and a little bit around, scope of AUCDI and a little bit of explanatory stuff, but the most of it will sit on the website. And at the same time, all of the feedback from the draft for comments, both the patient summary and the chronic condition management one, will be published with responses on the website as well. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just taken to, I guess, where the main update is. We're really looking at what it means now with AUCDI R1. As a lot of you would know, we were focusing on that idea of core of the core, being use case agnostic and setting that foundation. For release 2, we're now expanding on that core of the core, and we've started to include some use case specific content. So patient summary, chronic condition management, as I've just mentioned. So what we're proposing to do is to change the name of AU CDI from Australian Core Data for Interoperability to Australian Clinical Data for Interoperability. Now we're moving into release 2. Next slide. And that's because, as I've just mentioned, it includes more than that core of the core. It's the AU CDI R1 plus the patient summary content and the chronic condition management content. And then if you go to the next, it would then allow us to do AU CDI R3 next financial year to build on that. So to add to R2, add any additional use cases and content that we required, and start to look at how we can fold AU eRec DI R1 and any additional e-requesting content we need into that AU CDI R3. Next, please. So with this change, data groups and data elements specific to their clinical use cases will be identified as such. So we will have identifiers that are core, patient summary, chronic condition management, and e-requesting for R3, and any additional use cases we need. Data groups and data elements can have multiple use cases identified against them, so core and patient summary, for example. Next. So the benefits that we see for this is really that all the clinical use cases will be in one place. It'll be simpler to find. It does demonstrate that reuse, and it does make it clear it builds on that clinical community of practice that is built in this space to expand the scope beyond that core to specific use cases. And it still allows the TDGs to easily identify the data groups and elements in scope for the different use cases. And it also gives us room to grow and add additional use cases and data requirements beyond core of the core. So I think that's all the slides that I had. So I didn't know if there was any questions there. We only kind of provided this update to the CDG yesterday as well.
Hi, Kylan. I just threw it in the chat just so I could say it properly.
Yeah.
Because I guess I'm always looking at the words you're using.
Yeah.
And because to say something is clinical almost to me says there's a boundary of when this is not clinical data. And is it important to us to be expressing that health vision of what clinical means, as because we're stepping right away from core, which is pretty techy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be encompassing what the medical profession sees as clinical.
Yeah, so it was always clinical, but the focus was core of the core, and we are very aware that the definition of what core is in this group and other technical groups is very specific, and that there was this idea that it needed to be one-to-one. And with this additional of new use cases, we are moving away from that definition of core, and we kind of wanted to separate those, like, so that they're different, and we're kind of breaking that mental connection. So because it isn't that same core anymore. So yes, there is sort of a more what is clinically relevant, clinically useful, all of that that type of information. But the kind of scope of it hasn't really changed, and we're keeping the same acronym as well. So we're hoping that it doesn't actually cause too much change, but it's actually more clarification.
Yeah, good. Because I'm always trying to promote this language that the medical profession wants to use when I talk to the technology guys that don't have the health background. And I must admit, because I don't have a heck of a lot, but we're just trying to make sure we get all that vocabulary lined up so that we're understood. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Any other comments or questions for Kylan? All right, thanks very much, Kylan. We appreciate the update. Lets us know what's coming.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, guys.
All right, let's go to healthcare service. And I think that's Rob who'll be walking us through that. Rob, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm on the line.
Do you
Thank
want to
very much.
share, or would you like me to keep clicking through?
I think I might share, mainly because
No
there
problem.
may need to be a reference to other things outside of the PowerPoint. So hello, everyone. I'm Rob. I'm in Ricardo's team in the agency, in the clinical informatics team. And I'm going to be presenting the update on the, let's just check this is the right screen. So can I ask if someone can tell me the screen? Probably I've got the wrong screen here.
You're sharing the whole screen, Rob, but we can see the presentation.
Okay, right. Okay, so this is carrying on from Ricardo's earlier lead of the meetings recently held with the information session and the introduction. And I'll put it in the presentation mode. Thank you. So from an AIM perspective, this is just setting the scene to where we've got to with previous meetings. So we're wanting to introduce a healthcare service profile into the AU Core set to consider issues and feedback and proposing content, endorsing inclusion into the current fire AG for AU Core. So including, yes, the healthcare service profile, additions to the couple of capability statements for requester and responder. Also other content such as examples. There's a couple of examples put in, and in the future there'll be plans, I guess, for testing at connectathons and for balloting in the future. Any questions on that slide? Okay, so the approach taken was to really be consistent with the minimum expectations on data interactions across the AU Core set. We did consider and have a look at other specifications, most of which were really use case specifics and directory at that use case specific. And considered the feedback. So there was the prior meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was feedback page and some feedback was added. So we've considered that and responded to that and adapted from that. We've looked at a couple of issues, a handful of issues that were existing where we needed to pay attention to, and there's a few kind of follow-up things to do for those that we're going to propose. And mostly we've been trying to follow a common approach with other AU Core, the theme of AU Core being aligned to similar use, search parameters using in a similar kind of way, and the standing obligations and missing or suppressed data to be assumed. So I'll move on unless there's any points there. So the issues that we had a look at and paid some attention to are mainly these three. The first one, and if needed, I've got them hanging off in the wings if we needed to actually refer to them in some detail. However, so the first one is about AU Core Encounter, so not about healthcare service, but to refer in AU Core Encounter to healthcare service as a service that's providing the context for the encounter. And the ticket referred to the participant actor, and in R5, the participant actor set or the reference capability includes healthcare service, but R4 doesn't. So what happened in the meantime, I'm assuming as a response to that, is that the AU base encounter profile has the inclusion of an associated healthcare service extension, and I can refer to that as we need. So the response to this is that in order to have a means inside of AU Core to have an encounter reference a healthcare service is to, first of all, and this wasn't done by the way, this is just a proposal as a kind of a natural extension of the work that we've got to so far, is to propose that the AU base encounter reference AU base healthcare service for this extension. Currently, it refers to the core spec healthcare service, and following that, to propose that the AU Core Encounter explicitly include the extension, which it doesn't now, and reference it to the AU Core Healthcare Service. So, so that's a kind of the proposal of how this ticket may be addressed. We didn't go as far as doing any of this in the current proposal, but it was just a thought of what may be a logical progression.
Rob, can I question then, as point of order, is that suggesting that the agency would like to table that at a future meeting?
Yes, that's correct.
Would you like that to be the next meeting, or later?
Depending on how we go with this proposal, I guess, if the healthcare, my view, and I'll probably need to refer to Ricardo to some extent, but my view is if the healthcare service profile progresses well, then this would then follow, I think, fairly easily. Whereas if it doesn't progress well, then yeah, that's another matter.
I think as a point of order for existing issues and deferred ones, we need to give people notice that an issue will be tabled at a particular meeting.
Okay.
So I think because this is about a different profile, AU Core Encounter, I don't think we can address that in this particular meeting. So if we table it for the next meeting, I can send out the agenda, letting the community know in advance that we're going to vote on this, so that the people who are interested in this one can attend that meeting. Which and I think that's probably so if you're happy to state that now, then no problems. We'll automatically add that to the agenda. Or if you would like to consider whether or not not this meeting, but a later one, let me know, and we'll table that, and then I can just include it in the agenda announcements.
This definitely has to happen at a later time. Yes. This is only put here just for a proposal to consider in the future, but it has to, be properly tabled and whatnot. So, however the business is ordinarily run, yes, definitely follow along those lines. The point being that we didn't just in isolation think of just healthcare service. We wanted to consider the impact on other things, and this was part of it. So, okay. The next ticket down, unless we need anything further discussed about that first one. Okay, the next one down, I think this one is actually closed, but it was referred to in this process. So this one was raised by, I think, Richard in the agency sometime back, where there was a concern about different value sets potentially being conflicting across, encounter service and healthcare service. Given that the AU, also the core spec resource of healthcare service type was, I think, is still example, I think, and therefore there may be some conflict. So essentially the coming kind of full circle, I guess, is that the current proposed profile for healthcare service, the healthcare service type binding is then identical to the AU core service type binding, other than the strength is different, but the actual value set is identical. It's the NCTS SNOMED based, quite broad service types. Not just clinical, but the bigger set, something like 800 or 600, I think, comes to mind, concepts. So that one, even though the ticket was closed, I think it kind of seems like a natural, more of a closure maybe. Okay, the last one there is we was on a guidance to use, and this was Heath, you raised this one, a guidance about using practitioner, organisation, location, and I think there was a few other ones brought into the mix. And this one, we didn't really see any way that the profile itself, from I guess, constraint perspective, would introduce anything to address this. So we've just kind of left this one without any direct impact upon the profile. And I guess there's a question for should there be guidance included that's not currently there in order to clarify the usage. So that's where we landed with that one. Are there any questions about any of those? Okay, so the next slide is about so where we are now. So the last meeting that was held, the proposal was put up, and there was a number of constraints, and I can refer to that as we need. Feedback was given following that by Brett Esler, and we've taken that feedback on board and made some changes, and with majority of it. And the note is that this is intending to be quite a light touch we've basically dialed back some of the original thinking because some of the constraints were inclined to be thought of as more of a directory focused, and we didn't want that to happen. We wanted to be agnostic of any specific use case, and I'll show that second. And then, yeah, just there was some flags introduced, must support and obligations, a couple of examples, and as mentioned, the 2 capability statements were updated, and also the search interactions was also updated. So would people at this point like to see the original proposal, the one that was given out to feedback, or just go straight into what it currently, the proposal
I think
currently?
in the interest of time, Rob, I think we might need to move to the proposals.
Sure. Right. Okay. So here we go. We've got this is the current differential table. So we've got 4 remaining constraints. We've taken out provided by location and specialty. The remaining ones are just the support and obligations on identifier, not including any specific identifier, as was discussed, I think, in the last meeting. Type is retained with the 2 flags. The thing to note here is that the bindings of service type has been updated, as was seen in the earlier one. It hasn't changed. It is extensible, just to point that out, that the AU base is preferred. So here we've updated extensible, again, in an attempt to be consistent with other AU Core profile patterns. Brett did say to consider type to be mandatory, 1 ... star. We looked at that and thought that that was probably going too far in AU Core, and this was probably making it mandatory was probably more of a downstream inherited use case specific IG that would maybe do that. So that's why we've retained the 0 as a minimum. And name and telecom unchanged from the earlier proposal. Any comments or thoughts or points to raise here?
Keith? You're on mute, Keith.
For me, the whole point of healthcare service is actually to tell us what kind of service the healthcare service is. So having it optional kind of defeats the purpose of having the resource itself. So I tend to agree with Brett.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Heath. Michael?
I'm just checking the obligation on name being populate if known when it's a 1-to-1. Is that
yes?
populate?
That still works.
Yeah, because you're using missing data, you're still populating it.
If for some reason you're not allowed to disclose the name, then you would have missing data.
Suppressed data.
Does that still count as populating?
Yes, it does. Populate
so would
if
it
known.
be populate rather than populate if known?
No, populate brings in a forced capability. They are different. This has been evaluated as they're different things to have mandatory and populate if known. Populate,
that's fine, as long as it's consistent.
Oh yeah, okay. We can probably talk about it in the upcoming conformance sessions then if you like, rather than doing it here. But I'm absolutely happy to go into detail on why they're different things and why this is more relaxed than shall populate.
Yeah,
why that's appropriate.
it's not necessary. I was just making sure it was conscious. So decision to do.
Yeah, no worries. Yoni?
Yeah, thank you. Just checking what identifiers would you consider for the healthcare service profile to be identified as such? I noticed they just as identified, but are we talking about PRODA? Are we talking about Services Australia identifier? What exactly are we talking about? Or is it not mapped out as?
Not mapped out, and we'd need to reflect on the derived ones from AU base, and the 2 being present at the top there, AU HPIO and the residential care aged care service identifier. So we took the view that we didn't want to call out any specific identifier for healthcare service and left it just that at the obligation and must support level.
I think going a little bit further about the populate if known, what that means is if you've got an identifier whatever one you're using, you should populate that if you know it. And that's where that's sitting, and that could be anything at this point in time. That's how open the profile is currently proposed to be.
Thank you.
David?
Hi, yeah, I guess I'm looking at cardinality here, and to understand that this service came in, so we're saying that we will accept multiple identifiers for that service you're passing, and then to be able to say I could have multiple types as well?
Yes, that's what's proposed, yeah.
What's the name?
Multiple identifiers would actually be more aligned with multiple types of identifiers. So you could have a HPIO, you could have an aged care service, you could have some local identifier. You would probably not very commonly have the same type of identifier with multiples, but
the word type here is not about the type of identifier, it's the type of healthcare service, isn't it?
Sorry. Okay.
I think there's how do you classify a hospital? Or it depends on the abstract degree, I guess, of the healthcare service as to whether or not you're listing the multiple types or that can be applied. I absolutely think there's an argument either way. It becomes a very interesting argument if you want to restrict it, if you want to say there's only ever one code that could possibly meaningfully classify a healthcare service, rather than saying this particular service offers both cardiology assessments and like something else. I think within the Australian healthcare system, personally, I actually think overlapping codes tends to match more into what Services Australia has available and how we classify different services.
Right. So although I might be getting this health service, but inside this health service, you're getting all these other services as well.
Yeah, it is. I'll phrase it in a different way, and I'm not actually there in provider directory, but when you're listing a particular healthcare service that you offer in terms of a provider directory, you might often classify it in a couple of different ways with some overlapping codes, and that type at this point in AU Core allows you to do that, allows you to have a couple of overlapping codes there. I don't think there's this expectation that you're setting out this entire kind of menu of things, but I think it's realistic that when you're trying to describe the type of service, that more than one type might be necessary. If you're actually trying to identify a specific healthcare service, you want to say, I am this radiology clinic and I offer, and then you might have 5 separate specific types of radiology you can do. They're all still radiology, but they're 5, for example, if you want to do it that high level. Sorry, Ricardo?
No, I was just saying, have a look at one of the examples that's on the proposal, David. So there's one in there for the Morbid Crisis Hotline, and that one's got 2 types. So it's a crisis counseling and counseling service under the same healthcare service example. So that's just
Sure. And it's a pretty common data pattern to be able to like group things together and say, I'm offering you this, which underline is all these other things, by the way, right?
Something from my own ex-profession of physiotherapy. A physiotherapy service could provide neurological services or women's health services and cardiorespiratory therapy and musculoskeletal as different types. So I think that to me, from my personal experience, is where I would understand the multiplicity of type for one healthcare service.
And it could be noted that the previous PD2 spec, or the current PD2 spec, the actual provider directory spec, which has been around for a while, it has multiple types that are allowed.
So the only, I guess, sorry, Heath, but the only, I'll just end on this one. So the only challenge then I see is that if we're going to take lots of types and we only have one name, so that one name is going to have to be applied to all those types.
Hang on, let me just also clarify, coming back to identify, it's still the one healthcare service. It's still the one thing. You might know that one thing by a Services Australia identifier and a HPIO and a something else, but it's still the one service, and it might offer different types of things. So I think that's what's being proposed.
It's
right. So
it's
again,
an entity. It's an instance of an entity, David, and then that entity is delivering these types of services.
Which help characterize the entity really at the end.
Yeah.
And Yoni, you've got your hand up. You're on mute, Yoni, if you're speaking.
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, I completely agree. I think we should, focus on something like the HPIO and sort of standardize it so that everyone knows, where we're coming. And yeah, you can offer different services through the single, I guess, per se, healthcare service provider, and you can specify them further, but at least we have something to base it on.
Yeah, the challenge is HPIO itself is an organizational identifier, it's not a service identifier. So we are actually sort of considering leaving it there, but we need to open it for further discussion as to whether or not HPIO itself is a proxy for a services identifier rather than an organizational identifier.
The issue then becomes that you can only get an HPIO as far as I understand. I'm happy to be corrected, but as somebody who is a particular service offering, I mean, you can be technically an organization, you can call it an organization, but you'll be providing a certain service related to healthcare, obviously. So that comes down to the minutiae of the definition, I guess. But I think we should start with something, and it will help everyone if there's some kind of standardized format that everyone are familiar with. That's all.
I don't see that the HPIO is unique for healthcare services. In other words, the same HPIO may be associated with multiple healthcare services.
Yeah, the HPIO itself is by definition a unique identifier for an organization, and
Exactly.
an organization might provide multiple services. Each of them might have a service identifier. So the two of them are linked in certain degree, but they are not kind of joined to a hip in terms of its uniqueness, if you may.
So looking at time, I'd like to bring some of this conversation to a close, because what I think we're talking about the fact that there are identifiers, there are multiple identifiers. I think the question we need to consider in regards to what's been raised in terms of this proposal is there something we're prepared to mandate at an AU core level, which goes beyond provider directory and all use cases? Or are we happy to leave this as a first cut open, as if you have an identifier that you identify this healthcare service, you should populate it if you know it, which is the current proposal. And I guess that's what's out there.
And I agree.
I'd be happy to leave it as open at the moment until we decide otherwise.
All right.
Thank you.
So if that's identifier, we've talked about type and where there's multiplicity. Are there any comments around name and mandating name?
Might I ask before you go on to
Yes,
name,
sorry.
just his point, following Brett's point about mandating type, I just want to understand where we landed there as a group.
I think keeping it open until we got some experience is probably okay. And again, there will be a downstream IG, which is probably going to constrain it further. Not to speak for you, Rob, but
Yep.
Good, agreed.
Thank
And
you.
I think PD also left it with a similar cardinality. So I reckon that's also probably something that needs to be taken into account.
and I'm actually thinking about some of the existing systems. They don't necessarily classify themselves with a type. They just have a name.
Yep.
So then let's move on to the name portion of the proposal, just looking at time. Are there any comments or questions around name proposed as a minimum of 1? So mandatory.
I think something's got to be mandatory.
It's not just that something has to be mandatory. It's just that even when you're looking at a generic type of query on healthcare services, it doesn't make sense if there is no name for to be returned for the kind of healthcare services, the name of the healthcare services that's being provided. So from that kind of perspective, it should be mandatory in terms of cardinality.
I agree. Name should be imperative.
Okay, name and telecom. Any movement on telecom? Okay, thank you. So just to, the next one is on the update to the.
Actually, can we come back in terms of procedure? I think
certainly.
we need to motion on the profile before we
Sure.
go into interactions. So, yeah, I think we need to make this decision.
Okay, do I make that motion or is that somebody else?
I'll just call just before we do, because I think yes, you would be the perfect person to make a motion, Rob.
Okay.
Are there any other suggestions? This is the set that is proposed, that the set of minimum requirements for information around a healthcare service is proposed to be the identifier, the type, name, and telecom. Are there any other comments or questions that we want to consider before moving to the motion? All right, then if we consider the motion to be what is displayed on screen, please go ahead, Rob.
I would like to move a motion that the current cardinality as displayed on screen is the content of the first cut of the AU Core HealthcareService profile proposal.
Could I just amend that, Rob, that I think we want to go further than cardinality, and that it is the constraints shown on screen, including the obligations and the terminology binding?
Correct, yes, that's right.
All right, so with that motion from Rob, who would like to second?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that one. David here.
Thanks, David. Are there any other comments or questions while I move to find the poll? All right,
I guess my only other comment might be that it's interesting they talk about telecom, right? Because is it going to be another medium one day?
There are other things you can do around addresses or contact persons, though that's contact point, and telecom is really electronic communication details. So that includes websites.
All right, so it's just a funny name, telecom. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's a holdover from the old of E2 days, I think, that is just carried through. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain. If you do vote negative, we will ask what part of the proposal that you would seek to have a change to. We've only got 65% of people voting at the moment, so please go through and do that. If you are unable to vote because you're Ricardo or some other co-host, please put your vote in the chat. If you have dialed in and don't have access to the vote, you can say your name and whether affirmative, negative, or abstain is your vote. And I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share the results. So we've had no additions in the chat, and that means we have 24 affirmative, 0 negative, 8 abstain. That motion carries. We will move forwards with adding an AU Core HealthcareService profile with the following constraints as shown on screen. Please go ahead to the interactions, Rob.
Yes, thank you. So the interactions also have been dialed back from the proposed version that people would have seen prior to the feedback. So we've correspondingly with the constraints we took out the corresponding parameters and have left with just 2 mandatory, identifier and name, and 2 shoulds being the underscore ID and the service type. Are there any comments, thoughts?
For a point of clarity, can you confirm that this is proposed to be across both capability statements, requester and responder?
That's correct, yes.
And this is only search. There are other aspects of the capability statements. Will they be displayed?
In the PowerPoint, no, we don't have a slide for that, but I do have them here. So this is the which one? Requester.
Yeah, that might be better to run off because that is more complete. That says shall read and shall search, which wasn't on the PowerPoint. Okay, so opening this up for questions and comments.
Just to Stephen's point on the chat, yeah, Stephen, we will so we haven't published this latest version to the branch, so we will do that after this meeting.
Yeah, great.
Devil's advocate kind of commented on identifier search parameter. It's optional in the profile. If a system doesn't support it, an identifier, then we're forcing them to implement a search parameter, even though they don't have the concept. Understand a downstream might want to turn it to shell, but I'm just thinking AU Core might be a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
second that.
Yeah,
I don't
point.
think, yeah, sorry. Was that David?
Yeah, agreed. Good point.
Yes, I agree. That looks good.
Is there anyone on the line who would like to, I guess, retain a shall for identifier? So then can I query Heath, David, is the suggestion then that that would be a should or a may?
Yeah, it should.
It should.
Okay, understood.
All right, and we've also got in the chat that should, yes. So there seemed to be, I think, a general movement to should for that.
Okay, are there any other comments here? And is this taken to vote as well, I presume?
We can if there's a clear, so if there's a clear consensus on the group, including the friendly amendment then to move that to should, we would vote on this as a whole. If there turns out to be significant disagreement or controversy about separate things, we will go through individual votes for each of the parameters. So let's just check then through the rest of these to make sure whether or not there's a consensus from the group or if there are differences. So I believe we've moved from identifier, and I think the next part is shall for name. Are there any comments or questions around that part of the proposal? We've got a reaction that is positive. So let's move on to underscore ID. No, Heath?
Sorry, no, it's the next one.
Okay, underscore ID. Heath?
No, next one.
Oh, okay. Before we move on to the next one,
yep.
Let's stay on underscore ID and just move down the page. Are there any comments or questions about should underscore ID for healthcare service? All right, now let's move on to service type. Heath.
I think our pattern is to require both code and system in other places for tokens. No, sorry, I've got that mixed up. That's on identifier tokens, not code tokens. Yep, okay, fine.
Are there any other comments or questions on the proposal that service type should be supported as a search parameter? All right, would anyone like to raise any other search parameters that they think should be considered in this initial proposal? All right, if there's no other comments or questions, I think we can move to the motion, Rob.
I would like to make a motion that the search parameter transactions should be accepted as they are, with the friendly amendment that the unidentifier will be changed to should for both the requester and responder. Not that one. Yeah, identifier.
Could I suggest that it's the whole page for healthcare service, so the shall read, shall search as well. The search parameters will need, in order to be incorporated into AU Core, a place to live. So that's a part of it. Or did you want to make that a separate motion?
Maybe I'm not understanding the detail here, but
so if
same
you
motion?
scroll up, the proposal to incorporate a search parameter, we have to state a resource and a resource conformance. So here you've gone should, and that it conforms to healthcare service, and the profile conformance is shall, and the interaction summary is shall read, shall search. Those are still normative parts of AU Core. The search parameters are a part of the interactions for a capability statement, but they're not the only part. So we can have separate motions, one for the search parameters and one for everything above search parameters and up to that heading like 514327. But we'll definitely need to, we can't just incorporate the conformance requirements above that without a motion.
Okay. Separate motions then, it sounds like.
Okay, so the motion on the table is the search parameter portion of what we're seeing. We've got a motion from Rob. Who would like to second that?
Second it, Ricardo.
Thank you, Ricardo. Are there any other comments or questions while I move to the poll?
Do you want someone from another organisation?
That's always lovely.
I'm happy to second if you do.
Okay. We'll take Heath as second to strengthen the community demonstration of support. And I will launch the poll. So that is the vote for the current motion, which is the search parameter portion. As Rob noted, that's a should on identifier. We've got affirmative, negative, and abstain. Please put your vote in the chat if you cannot access the electronic poll. Or call out your name and your vote if you've dialed in and don't have access to either the poll or the chat. All right, I'm counting that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll. I'll share the results. So there are 21 affirmative, 0 negative, and 8 abstain. That motion carries. Next motion, Rob.
I would like to move a motion that the conformity statements above the search parameters be accepted as they currently read on screen for both the responder and the requester.
Thank you, Rob. Who would like to second that?
I can second that. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
on the
Yoni.
edge.
Any other comments or questions while I go to the poll? All right, I will launch that poll. You should now see that in front of you. Instructions are the same as before. Please go ahead and vote. Okay, we've got 70%. I'll count that down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share the result. So this time we have 22 affirmative, 0 negative, 9 abstain. The motion carries. That has passed. Back to you, Rob.
So really in closing, the last slide really is just where to from here. So updates, there'll be a pull request following this meeting. And actually, Ricardo, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but anyway.
I just took that from another one, so not too sure if.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's all right. And then in future, connectathon and balloting at some stage later down the track. So yeah, that's it. Yeah. Any other comments anyone wants to make? I appreciate people's time very much and their contributions, and it's excellent. Really good to be part of the process. So thank you very much.
So if you're alluding to the snapshot bit, we basically will do a baseline of the IG leading up to a connectathon. Or the ballot. That's what the snapshot means.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks very much, Rob. We've got
Thank you.
that through. That's a great work by all of us on the line. and we can add that in pretty soon, I reckon. Now,
Thank you very
next
much.
bits. We were going to do AU Core JIRAs. We don't have time today, so these are held over to next meeting. And what we do need to get into, because we've got 15 minutes left, is what's next. Time to set a bit of context. We're going to go into more detail in the next meeting. But context, guys, we're quite the way through AU Core R2. And in fact, we've got a bunch of opportunities for testing. We already did the first one, which was the Connectathon. And we've got the next one coming up, which is the Spark testing event in June for those of you who register very soon and then come join us. But we're going into ballot for working standard really, really soon. AU Core R2. And it's really important that we actually do that on time, because there are downstream projects, including e-requestings, ballot for working standard, that are reliant on AU Core R2. And so we need to be really careful that we are incorporating and building in and maturing any of our normative changes, especially those that might impact patient summary or e-requesting, and moving to a time frame that actually means that we line up and don't impact either patient summary or e-requesting. And so there's a bunch of testing content, and I'm just going to call out real quick here. Here's where we are. We're kind of at the end of development now. I mean, that's what it is for a maintenance release. We were going through that light touch. We've agreed on the R2 scope and principles and what we're going to support in terms of our focus around supporting our downstream IGs, around the incremental enhancement of AU CDI coverage, and around refining the existing content in AU Core. And that's basically what we've been doing. As of today, we've essentially added the planned new profiles. We've got related person, we've got medication statement, we've got healthcare service. Those three are in. We've already tested a couple of those at Connectathon, and we've got the Spark testing event coming up really soon, which is where we want to take any normative content for R2 that we're going to come in, so that we have a degree of confidence before we put out a ballot for working standard. So we're coming down to the closing window of content closure for AU Core R2, especially the content that is normative. And that means we're in the final refinements. We've kind of been working through the other JIRAs, most of which have been editorial. And that's going to lead us on to where we need to go now for the last few meetings before we finish the normative work. So this is our schedule right up to working standard. We've got 3 calls before we do, well, 4, but this is very soon, before we have the Spark testing event. And that's where we're looking to really go through any of the normative changes we have. And then we've got a couple of calls to really deal with any of the testing feedback, make sure that the informative changes and editorial are in line. We're comfortable with where we are in terms of our status in AFMM, and we go through the necessary governance steps in order to publish a ballot snapshot and then go to ballot in. And I've listed some tentative dates there. HL7AU needs to advise, but based on previous years, this is the very likely time frame. So if I overlay that for us, the next 3 calls are where we need to put in any of our normative, basically. And looking through our backlog, there's been some additions from people who have suggested, hey, there's something you need to add. And there's also been some feedback of, look, that's too restrictive. I think you need to relax that. And so we're about to do a call here to say, for anything that needs to be addressed in AU Core R2, now's the time. You need to let us know, and so that we can schedule that into these meetings and get this in place, so that whatever we're saying is AU Core R2, we can take to the testing event and kind of confirm and test that out and take the feedback from that before we go into publication. Because really our very last call for changes is early July. That's the last possible date where we can make any kind of meaningful, interesting changes here, because there's governance to then update this and go through the fire work group that has an administrative overhead. That means we need to progress through that before we can go into ballot. So What that means then, we've got next meeting, we should be prioritizing the normative and then also including any other editorial to fill that in. We've got, I'll do a bit more detail on the R2 and what other activities we need to do. We've got a couple of normative items that have been flagged as relevant and kind of, Rob, can I just confirm, Rob Ricardo, should we address the encounter thing you've raised? Sorry, I was editing this while you were speaking into our next meeting.
I think that would make sense.
Yeah, agree.
Ricardo, I defer to
Agree.
you. Okay.
Yep. Let's do that.
All right, no problem. So in our next meeting, we'll prioritise the normative issues and I'll send out the agenda along with the minutes from this meeting. That will mean we've got an item here that was raised and said, please add this onto the agenda, and then we'll deal with the encounter one. And then we'll include any other editorial or informative that's in the backlog. That includes the 4 that were originally tabled today, and there's a new one that is was suggested to be brought to a meeting. And I'll put a call out now. For those people who are on the line, are there any other items that you would like on the agenda that you know now that we can talk about? Okay, no problem. So let me put out this thing to say to you folks online, and I'll send out an email. Actions for the next fortnight. We're now in the last call, really, for AU Core normative changes. So there's a request there to review the AU Core JIRAs that you have reported that are open or that are deferred. And I know there's a number of people on the line who've been contributing to reviewing the specification, which is amazing. Can you please go through what you have raised and identify what you think needs to be addressed in R2, noting there is a particular scope and focus of R2. We're not necessarily addressing, like we haven't prioritized dealing with pregnancy status or a whole bunch of other things, but there are some JIRAs in there that I think change requests to existing content or kind of editorial or otherwise. Please review those. If there's something that you are looking to have addressed in R2, please let me know so that we can get that scheduled in an upcoming meeting. And the other ask is that if you look at your change request and you're like, no, this doesn't need to be R2, this can be later, the request is for you to make a comment to that in JIRA so that we can have a clearer picture of the work that we really need to get through in the next 3 meetings. And please also consider what you haven't raised. If you've been looking at something and go, look, I actually think this might be a problem. The request is in the next fortnight or so, please have a think about that again. Think about if that really does need to be worked through, and we should be addressing it in R2 so that you can propose the change, create it in JIRA, let us know so that we can actually incorporate that into the proposed update for AU Core R2. So that's the request from folks. And I think that's where we are. That's everything. Heath.
We want to mention the conformance sessions coming up.
You're right. I can't believe I missed that. I should have put that in updates. Apologies. So AU Patient Summary Fire IG is doing some work to undertake looking at conformance and what does it mean to be a downstream implementation guide, and also looking at obligations and inheritance, and they are intended to be compliant to AU Core. And so there is a set of work that they will undertake, similar to what we went through in terms of Conformance Fridays, to contemplate what does it mean must support in patient summary. What does it mean to be compliant to both IPS and AU Core? How do you implement these? And they're going to work through that content, and that will have implications to AU Core. We have items on our backlog, which is to be clear to downstream projects on what is required if you were going to claim conformance to AU Core that is sitting on our backlog. And I rather suspect that in order for patient summary to address this, they're going to need to work through some content and come back to us with what they think that is, and we will need to consider this. And I think it also has some implications for how AU Core has been defined and modelled to ensure that a downstream IG can work with that content. And so what's been proposed is a series of conformance discussions for those people who want to form part of what is really, I guess, a focus group. If you're interested, if it's part of the proposal you want to discuss, coming back to either core or patient summary, to have a look at this session. We'll put them out as optional invites, but you can also indicate the times that work for you so that we can make sure that that schedule actually does work for you. Did I just see that someone put the poll in the chat?
I did, yes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Heath. Did you want to add anything further to what I was saying, Heath?
No, just that at this stage, we're just looking for an applicable time, in particular, our first session. Obviously, we've got some feedback that next week is between Easter and Anzac Day. So we added some extra options here. So we're just trying to work out when to have our first session. From there on, we're going to work out which day to have our ongoing fortnightly sessions. So two polls there. We're interested in getting your feedback, and then I'll book it in as soon as possible.
Thanks, Heath.
So maybe just like deadline, I guess, I don't know what, today. If not, obviously Tuesday or something like that, if you can get it in over the weekend or soon so that we can plan this out ASAP. But next week is coming very quickly, so.
I think it does need to be close of business today because the first potential is Wednesday. So
yeah,
I think it has to be today, and those invites need to go out this afternoon. So hop onto it, folks, if you're interested and you'd like to come to the first one, which is more about AU, well, not necessarily AU Core conformance, although that's going to play a heavy part. It'll be conformance 101.
Yeah, I'll be revisiting basically what we've got with AU Core, more to demonstrate what is HL7 conformance in general, but using AU Core as an example. So
Alrighty,
for those
thanks,
that
Heath.
are actually interested in, that are new to AU Core, that might be a benefit when we're talking about obligations and must support and stuff. If you don't understand what they mean, that'll be a good session to come to.
Are there any comments or questions around the proposed conformance sessions? All right. Is there any other comments or questions that people would like to make before we wrap up? Have I missed anything else? Chances are I have, coming into holidays. All right, well, let's wrap up from that point. I'll give you a whole 4 minutes back. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. And we'll see you after the Easter break. Have a great Easter, everybody.
All the best. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So